Welcome to Market Buzz. I'm Greg Schnell, the Canadian technician and host of the Market Buzz. So today I want to cover off some cellar dwellers that appear to start showing some life. Not sure if there will be any more to it than that, but that's kind of the way it's looking right now. So I thought it might be interesting to go through those before they've made huge moves. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about gold names are trying to rally and marijuana names that got a bid on Tuesday. Last week I mentioned miners were starting to poke their head out of the hole, and copper names have exploded higher since then. And I don't know if we're going to get the same pop out of the marijuana and the gold names, but it looks to me like the breadth of the current rally is really spreading out, and we're starting to see lots of other areas in the market get bid. So perhaps some of these names that have been cellar dwellers can actually make the turn into real trades. Okay, so first of all, just briefly getting into marijuana. So this is the intraday for a group of marijuana stocks that when you're working with them, you got all kinds of problems, right? You got different closes and very low prices depending on your investment style. So we can always prune those out. I think the thing I wanted to point out today was just like Tilray was up 15%. Hexo was up 14.8. American Cannabis 13%. I agree on 11 cents. That's probably pretty easy, but these names have been beaten down, and here's Canopy Growth Corporation up around 8% on the day, Cronos up around 8%. So there was definitely some moves starting in this. Valens, the stock's been range bound, but we want to see if it can start to break out. So one of the things I like to watch for when we look at these charts is to see whether or not the chart is actually starting to base. And in this case, Valens, in my opinion, is not. And then if we go to something like Canopy Growth, at least it's kind of been pulling down. And down in the bottom corner there, you can see a bit of volume piling up. Now, it's not a lot of volume, but it's at least something to work with. When I look at something like OrganiGram, these names have literally just been beaten down, and there's not much to them. Again, they got caught up in the meme spike in early 2021, and you can see this one's had a big pullback. But when we look through these stocks, we can do something else. We can either put scooter ranking on them to help sort them, so that could make it a little bit better. And not all of them are going to have scooter ranking because there's a lot of low-priced stocks in the group. But when we do that, now we can bring the top ones, the stronger names, to the top. And here's Cardiol. And this one had a big move today of 4%. Innovative properties. This one's up around $250. Here's CLIQ, moving quite nicely. Call it Alcanna. It is $8, $8.50. But look at the spike it had in September. It literally went $6.50 to $8.50. So perhaps this is just flagging and ready to take off on the next one. This one is the inverted marijuana ETF, so obviously it's been one of the better performers lately, but lost big today. And then if we, just as we go down the list, looking over here, you can see all of these stocks are terrible. So there's no structural strength here, but there is a reason to look at them today. And what would that reason be? Well, one of the things I noted when I was looking through my charts, and I just look at marijuana, the HMMJ ETF every week. But the big thing that was happening here, and it shows up better on a weekly, is that there's we'll just grab the line chart here. And what we see here is if we connect the dots from here through here, this is a reasonable place to expect it. So we're bouncing off the two prior lows, and we've got a nice significant downtrend that's been going on really since the meme pop in February. And then I was going to use an arrow. Maybe I'll just stay with the trend line, but we have this trend line here coming down at a meaningful place relatively close to where we are. The PPO's momentum has been pretty quiet, and if all of a sudden we were to start getting a turn up here, perhaps this could start getting a bid. And we saw this the last time marijuana went on, I'll call it a year-long pullback. Briefly tried to rally and then failed again. And then coming out of the March 2020 lows, I'll call it the COVID lows, it went on quite a run. So I always like to keep track of momentum, and what we see here is we had a big momentum run up, and then when this thing kind of rolled over and topped, it's been dropping ever since. So we just need to be aware of where we are. We're in the cellar, and if we're in the cellar, there's nothing saying it'll turn around, but there's at least a reason to look here today, and that is that perhaps we're bouncing off the big long-term trend line on this. So that's the only reason that somebody might want to go take a look here. And the other thing that is happening that is important is the rally is broadening out into different sectors. And so as that starts to happen, what we like to pay attention to is there might be rotation, and we'll start to see them leave areas that have been doing well and go into areas that haven't. And as the market starts to pick up speed and broaden out, then all the boats kind of get lifted higher. Some of these play catch up. And so there's a good reason to go look at it from that perspective. So one is that the chart was at its trend line, and the second is that the overall market seems to be ramping up. Now, what would make me say that about the market? So let me just go get one chart. So this is a strength index that I produce. So I calculate it manually, and it's just designed to help us find momentum in the market. But what you can see up here is we had a really big surge back in March of 2020, and we ran up, and we stayed up with almost every single industry group surging higher. And so when that was happening, that was a very bullish place to get on board. And then we had these places in here where my indexes pulled back, and the market did as well. And then we actually had a separation start to happen in the market where the large cap players just kept going. But underneath, the market started to get weaker. And you might remember in the February timeframe there, all of the electric vehicle stocks and all of the automation plays and the, I'll call it the whole GameStop phenomena from Reddit came in there. And we had a whole wild market cycle. And during that market cycle, we had a sell-off. And it doesn't look like much on this chart, but at the time what happened was some of those stocks actually dropped 50%, but the indexes hardly moved. So it was quite a newsworthy event. And then we kept rallying out of there, and that worked out pretty good. But since May, we dropped off, and May was really a change where some of the commodities that were running, like copper and lumber, all topped out in early May, and all of those stocks started to pull back. But what did take over was a lot of the technology names continued to run. So we had this bifurcated market where technology had sold off from February to May, and then the commodities had sold off from May to September. So we really had kind of half the market working, but not the whole thing. What happened here was, even though the market was it was still rallying. The large caps were still rallying. S&P and the NASDAQ 100 were doing fine. In general, most of the industry groups were still, they had lower momentum. So they were actually losing momentum, and yet the market was still climbing. And normally that would create some sort of a pullback. Well, in September, we had this 6-week pullback. It wasn't huge, but it was an 8% drop on the NASDAQ. And that pullback creates a certain level of momentum kill, right? It just slows everything down. But the big thing that happened just this week is we actually started to make higher highs above all of the summer momentum readings, and more groups than ever are starting to take off to the upside. And this indicator is a relatively smooth indicator, but I have some other ones that are faster, and they're all the way up in the 80 and 90% levels. So they're doing really well. And so it's that change in momentum that I think also can bring these other names on board. Anyway, so that's why I think marijuana might be worth a look. normally I wouldn't kind of be going to the gutter to try and look for things, but they all started to pop today, and even on the Canada has quite a few listings for them. So let me just take you to the main dashboard and show you something there. When you are looking around, what you can see is here's Tilray, here's Cronos, here's Canopy Growth Corporation, and here's Aurora Cannabis. So all of these four names, they were in the biggest percent up on the TSX today. So it wasn't like it was one name. It was a group of names, and it's that kind of change that I think at least makes us go, what's going on over there, and just start to look around. So that's one of the reasons that it came to my attention, but it was also sitting on that trend line. I look at it every week, and I kind of go, well, this is interesting. We'll see if anything starts to percolate around here, and sure enough, coffee showed up. So I think that's a good place to poke into. Now, if we go into the stocks again, there's not a lot to like here. I've got these sorted based on a sort order from a long time ago, and this medical marijuana ETF at the time was one of the best. Now it's down at 6.7. It's pretty weak. But what we can do is we can go down. Well, let's add one more column. We can add volume, and then basically click on volume, and then click on the scooter ranking. What that's going to do is, if there's no scooter ranking, it'll rank them on volume. So right in the, I'll call it the range of about, after we get through the first 20 stocks or so, we can start getting into the ones that have higher volumes instead. Okay, so we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and to do that, we're going to number it in sorted order. Oh, I have to delete something, sorry. I should have done that differently. Let me just scroll all the way to the top, and when I do that, I need to edit the list, and I need to get rid of all these numbers first. So that's pretty easy to do. I'm at the bottom of the page, select all, whoops, not copy, remove numbers from all of the charts. Okay, so now we're going to go back to summary mode, and we're going to sort it by volume and then by scooter ranking. And again, that's going to give us the top 20 stocks that have scooter rankings, and then the ones that don't, it'll sort it by volume. So we scroll to the bottom of the page again, and we just hit number in sorted order. Oh, I have to do one more thing. Yeah, that's all right. Number in sorted order, and we should be good to go. Okay, so we've got these sorted. And again, we could have used the price as a filter. We could have used anything. We're just trying to use something to give us a view. But let's go look at the top 30 names in here and just kind of see what we've got. So when we scroll through this Cardiol Therapeutics, this is biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. That's all I know about them. But I would just say that there's a resistance layer in here around $5, $5.50. And if it can start to perk back up to the upside, that's probably pretty good. The volume's been rising as of late, so that chart looks a little bit better. Innovative industrial properties, it was kind of leaning towards a lot of the cannabis growers, so that one was a strong chart. Here's Alcanna, specialty stores, and then you can see 843's resistance. We got up to 873. We're just hanging around in that zone, 844 right now. So any sort of break to the upside after 6 weeks sideways, and again, all the other charts have been going south. So if this one actually starts to turn up, might be a worthy breakout. So that would be interesting, and the volume's actually been perking up over the last few weeks. Inverse marijuana, not really going to help us today. And then the Aurora Cannabis, so this one up 6% so far this week. And again, it's just been building in here, call it 750, right in around that area. But it's been hovering in here for really since July. So it doesn't have the selling pressure anymore. It just hasn't started to turn up yet. Our PPO momentum indicator just went positive this week. So that's the first push. Sitting right where we are now, we're at about 6 week highs, and it wouldn't take very long. If we could get above anything in here, we'd be at 3 month highs. So that one's also a pretty interesting stock. OrganiGram Holdings US listing. This one's continued to drift lower, but in the last 4 weeks, it's closed pretty much in the same range here. So trying to kind of stop the bleeding and build a bit of a base. Aurora Cannabis US listing, same thing, we already talked about that. So OrganiGram. This is GT Biopharma, and this one was $19 down to $6. I'd say the only thing that's good about it is it's been hanging around $6 for 3 weeks. PPO momentum is still weak, and there's no real big volume surge coming in. Corbus Pharmaceuticals, another angle to play this. This one is basing right around $1 here, and it looks like it's closed every week for the last week, 6 weeks at like $1.01 or something like that. Anyway, it's trying to hold up in the same range as its prior low. If it could finally turn, that might help. And then you can see these charts are terrible. There's no question about it. But Tilray up 14% this week. Giant downtrend, trying to break through that. It's just ugly. If we switch this over to a daily chart, that might give us a little bit more of a view of what happened. But this is, taking out the highs of October, so that's nice. Still well below the highs of September, but at least it was a reverse thrust. There was no real clue that the volume was coming in here, but it did trade in a tight range for the last 5 days, and then all of a sudden took off this morning and went on a run. PPO momentum has started to turn up, so that looks good. At least there's something going on with the stock. Again, when you're bottom fishing, you're way down in the low barrel here, and so many people cover off the technology names. I could cover those off too, but it's just thought I'd go and look at something a little more unique. So here's marijuana ETF. So this is kind of the average marijuana stock, and you can just see drifting lower, but in the last 3 or 4 weeks, getting into a relatively tight range here, and all of a sudden making 3-week highs just to start this week. So that looks better. Scott's Fertilizer, that's been pulling down. I'd say consolidating for the last 6 weeks. PPO is almost at a buy point. Cronos continuing to fall. Well, it made a 3-week high today too with a big outside bar, so perhaps that's enough to lift us. And again, PPO indicator has been gradually slowing down to the downside, and if it could finally start to turn up, that might mark a nice change in the stock. Valens Groworks, I saw this one upgraded to 375 the other day by an institution. Until the chart changes direction, for me, it's a non-interest. But you can just see PPO momentum drifting lower until it starts to turn. That's going to be a hard purchase for me. Canopy Growth Corporation continuing to drift lower. So you get the idea. These charts are ugly and haven't really started to turn, but the reason we're starting to look at them is the trend line. Okay, let's find the ones that the volume have started to show up. Here's Hexo that had started to pop, had a scooter ranking of 0.3, so 99.7% of the stocks were worse than this one on the Toronto Stock Exchange, were better than this one. So this one, with a little bit of a heartbeat at the prior lows here, down around $2. Nice place to get a bid. But again, this thing, it's a pretty sour stock here. So if this was the new move up, you can just see the selling volume. I would think it's probably exhausted on selling with that kind of volume showing up to wrap it up. And here's a stock with 0 scooter ranking. So it is really beaten down. And then what we've got here is, again, this is just an ETF for cannabis related names. Pretty ugly. Okay, looking quickly, Sundial Growers, this one, trading awful, but lots of volume so far this week. I don't think it's the volume that's impressing me. It's more the fact that somebody's trading this in and out. There's a lot of volume going on here, but no real price action change yet. Marijuana Company of America, trading sideways for 6 weeks at 3 cents. These are pretty rough looking charts. Anyway, Green Organic Dutchman down here. We're getting real quick through this. Anything I want to cover off here, maybe a PPO cross starting to show up on Medical Cannabis Payment Solutions. No idea what that might be. Oxley Cannabis Group. Again, all of these charts are dreadful. So if nothing else, today's push puts them on the radar to just start watching them to see if something else might show up. Okay. So here's gold, and gold's been out of favor. It's not that the chart's been diving. The chart's actually been relatively sideways. So here's GLD, and you could just see it's not like it's really been plummeting, but the chart is, I'll call it range bound between 160 and 170 for the most part since the beginning of the year. If we go to the actual dollar sign gold, okay, what we're looking for in here is, again, this 1698 is a pretty important low, and then 1905 is a big high, and a lot of people are talking about 1835, and the reason for that is if we could get above this prior high, at least we'd start to make at least a higher high and then maybe a higher low and walk our way out of here. So there's some interest starting to show up here, and it's not huge yet, but at least there's some change in trend. Now here's GDX. Whoops, what did I do wrong there? GDX. There we go. And what we notice here is this has actually started to kick up and is very close to taking out this prior high. Still a big downtrend that has been broken. Full stochastic on the weekly chart has turned up. There's a big giant relative strength downtrend here for a year. If this was going to start to break higher, I'd be a little bit more interested. So last week, some of the gold stocks started to surge, and sometimes you kind of see that breakout and then it's a pullback. Well, at least the gold miners are starting to outperform gold. And the one trick I like to use, which is a really important one for me, is I like it when these long PPO setups start to show and then they start to break out, and sometimes it's nothing, but again, here was I'll call it a PPO setup that was going nowhere, and then it finally broke out, and that was kind of the clue the low was in, and then this went on, a longer uptrend. Now it's been on a downtrend, and the real question is, if we started to break this 1 year trended momentum, would something finally happen here? And maybe, again, we're looking in the cellar here. We're not exactly looking for breakout stocks, but some of these move pretty fast when you buy them near the lows. So that's kind of the reason that we're over in this area, is that the gold miners are starting to outperform gold a little bit. So again, when we go look at that list, this is just today and Tuesday night. So sitting here looking through what's going on, and these are some pretty low price stocks. When we sort it the other way, obviously we're going to get something more interesting. Now, this is my list of gold stocks to trade. Now, what I did do was I went through and I filtered out everything that was under $1 to get rid of it. And then I've just got it sitting here by scooter ranking. So again, we could add the volume column. The volume column and the scooter ranking. So we're going to sort it by volume and then scooter. And so once we get through the scooter, then we could go look through the volume charts. I'm just trying to show you some ways to manipulate the data so you can look at it. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to put it in this sort order. And so there are no numbers there, so we don't have to go delete them. But then what we need to do is we need to go to the bottom of the list and hit this big number in sorted order. And the current sort order will be preserved by adding number before the name. Are you sure you want to rename? Yes, we do. And so it's just literally going to put a number in front of everything that was there in the order we had it. Now we can go look 10 per page again, or we could do it any way we want. But here's a precious metals chart. And again, if I show you that gold chart, gold miners have been falling for a year. Look at what this chart has been doing. That's looking pretty strong to me. So this is obviously one of the big leaders out there, holding up pretty well. Taseko Mines, this one broke out above this, call it 250 base, somewhere in here, to new 3-month highs just last week. So it's trying to go higher. Now the real question is, can it get through the prior high? So it was on a big uptrend, pulled back for 3 or 4 months, and now seems to be making higher highs and higher lows. Victoria Gold Corp, this one been kind of choppy, but basically built a double bottom base here and is starting to accelerate up. PPO is a lot higher on the second low, and now momentum is in a positive place right above 0, so that's a little bit bullish. Here's Capstone Mining. They also have a lot of copper, and copper had a big move last week. So this stock was 460, went to 570 inside a week. So that was a pretty nice move for 6 days. And then it's pulled back a little bit as it gets to this prior resistance. But I think any sort of breakout above that looks pretty good. Go Gold Resources, here's another one just kind of sitting below this 340 level. If it can kind of get a heartbeat and a kick, perhaps it takes off to the upside. Argonaut Gold, quite choppy and a bit of a lower lows, lower highs scenario so far, so it doesn't really make it easy to own. But again, gold was average today, and this stock was up quite nicely, up 3.5%. So there are some names starting to get bid. Kirkland Lake Gold, this one broke through the 55 level and then just kind of hovering there. Hasn't really got any mojo starting to fire up. Endeavor Mining, again, big 1 year base here. Trying to hit new 52-week highs. It needs to get to 32.51. It's at 32.25. A little kick like that, and all of a sudden you got a gold stock at 52-week highs. That isn't the way the gold chart looks. Okay, Dynacor Gold Mines, this one's been hovering up near its highs, but hasn't been able to do much over the last month and a half. We'll see if it's got any heartbeat starting to show up. China International Resources, just hovering sideways. Again, another chart that isn't following gold down, but it hasn't broken out yet. IM Gold was really hit last August. It was 535. It was down to 220, so a 50% haircut. And then that doesn't look good on anybody when you get a 50% haircut. And then 250, you're trying to get back above that. We've done that. So now we're at I'll call it a 2-month base, very close to breaking out to a 3-month base. But the problem is we've got the 200-day moving average just overhead here, and it isn't doing very well. I will say the one positive piece of news here is the scooter ranking is starting to improve on this stock. And perhaps the reason for that is look at the volume that's starting to show up. So all of a sudden somebody's interested in buying this stock for the first time in a long time. You can see it went for 6 months here with relatively low volume, and all of a sudden, 7.5 million shares a day in a gold name is a little bit surprising considering the shape of the gold chart. Oceana Gold hasn't done anything for a year, sloshing around like a wave on the ocean. And then LTS Minerals drifting lower, nothing really great, trying to find support at the 200-day moving average. But it had a wonderful move last year around the same time, started in November, December. And as it kicked off, that was a nice move from 11 to 19 and made for a good run into the spring. Sea Gold, again, trapped under the 200-day moving average. Now we're already getting down to some pretty weak charts. The scooter ranking's already down around 49%. So having trouble getting over the 200-day moving average. Been a pretty straight pullback from 15 to 11, so a little bit of a drawdown there. And then Goldfields International, just a horizontal resistance sideways here. When gold broke out here in May, I thought it was going to do something that literally rolled over right away. And now we've really got a big play in, I'll call it $10 just to pick a level. But if it could break above that, then you might have something to talk about. Lundin Gold, really choppy chart, just driving back and forth here between 9 and 13. Not much to like about that. Wesdome Gold Mines, a big run up, a big pullback, a big run up, a big pullback. And are we starting a big run up? That's a great question. The scooter ranking got up really high, even though, remember, gold was on that gentle slide, and then all of a sudden it took a month off. So this is an interesting place for the stock to see if it can make a turn. Anyway, with that, thanks for taking the time to join me on Market Buzz. Market Buzz airs Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Good trading out there, everybody. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with Stock Charts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're going to bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.